12 today, presented by Modelo. Heard on TuneIn, watched on Big 12 Studios. Really excited to be chatting right now with ESPN's Bill Connelly, Bill C, SP Plus. Bill, how are you?
Not too bad. How are you doing?
Doing very well, thank you. Appreciate your time. Always fun to visit with you. And we've been talking a lot about you this last week because, I mean, you in your final preseason SP Plus ranking, you alluded to the fact that the coaches poll disagrees with much of your SP Plus ranking, especially for the Big 12. You have, as you pointed out, Texas Tech is underrated. The rest of the Big 12 overrated relative to your SP Plus rankings in the coaches poll. And the AP poll did the exact same thing. Yeah. So I guess let's start here. Is this as large of a discrepancy as you've seen? Because I haven't tracked this going back years. That's number one. And then number two, like, what does this say to you?
Yeah, I think, well, so with the polls, I think a lot of pollsters are thinking of it as a power rating, who are the 25 best teams. And then a lot of people are trying to project to the end of the season and figure out, like, I think this team's going to go 10-2, and therefore, I'm going to rank them 15th or something like that. SP Plus is only the former. It's only a power rating. And between number 21 BYU, 30 Utah, 31 Arizona, 32 TCU, bunch of teams bunched together. One of those teams is going to, get some scheduled breaks, going to win some close games, and probably going to go 10-2 and, rank about 15th in the AP poll at the end of the year. So I think that's probably a source of the discrepancy. It always has kind of the, ACC or Big 12 middle class, so to speak, or light heavyweights maybe. It always has them a little lower than the polls do, and then it always has like the SEC's middle class with a bunch of teams that are ranked between about 15th and 25th, and some of them are going to go like 7-5 or something and finish unranked. It always has those teams higher than the polls, and so I really do think it's just that some people are making predictions with their poll votes, and that accounts for most of that difference.
All right, Bill, take us through Texas Tech being underrated, the rest of the Big 12 apparently being overrated.
So with Texas Tech, I think they got punished for basically losing their starting quarterback twice. They were third in SP Plus at the end of last season, and that was with, Baron Morton wasn't terrible. I feel bad. We spent most of this offseason talking about how terrible Tech's quarterback play was last season, and that's why they needed Sorsby. He was clearly solid. He just wasn't good enough in the playoff. Their defense was so dynamite. The run game was explosive enough to keep the points going, and it all worked out really well. They finished third in SP Plus. That was incredible.
Yeah.
And so they're projected to fall because they lost Morton and some other starters, and obviously there's a lot of turnover in the front six. But they fall to eighth, and meanwhile it feels like with the polls they fell a little bit, and then they fell more when it turned out that Hammond was going to be the guy. And so yeah, it was kind of a weird little double dip there. I think they would have ranked higher with Sorsby, but then they fell too far afterwards. They're going to be really good. And as far as they lost some dynamite talent in the front six, but I kind of give them massive benefit of the doubt there because, among other things, for all the money they spent in the portal last season, most of the players they signed got better with Tech.
Yes.
They identified talent well, and then they deployed it beautifully. And so I'm just going to assume that happens again until proven otherwise.
Yeah, well said. Who, from a Big 12 perspective, surprised you with their SP Plus?
Well, so after the March projections, BYU, I believe, was in the teens. I don't remember for sure. And I just kind of, these last few weeks, just make little tweaks along the way, figure out better conference adjustments and this and that. But every adjustment I made seemed to bump BYU down like a half point. So they're still 21st. They're still comfortably the second best team. And they only lost to Tech last year, so it makes sense that they're behind Tech and no one else, but they're still a little lower than I would have expected. If I was ranking these teams by hand, I would have them in the 15 to 18 range. I think their line play is going to be dynamite. Defense is going to be dynamite. The receiving core taking a pretty big hit and needing to start over. I am concerned about that, but they can lean on physicality really well, and I would assume they'll do that again. So I expected them to be a little higher. Otherwise, it really is like just a whole bunch of teams that could be awesome but have 2 or 3 question marks, and they're all bunched together. Yeah. Again, like within 3 points of each other, you have Utah, Arizona, TCU, Kansas State, Houston, Oklahoma State. and then kind of another batch not too far behind that. It's going to be a really, really fun race. Even if Tech is as good as last year, the second spot could be really entertaining, especially with the variance in schedules, where you have like a Kansas State playing barely any of the top teams. Texas Tech doesn't play any of the top teams either, for that matter. But then like lots of battles between the BYU and Utah and Arizona and whatnot.
Bill Connelly from ESPN SP Plus is our guest here on Big 12 today. Bill, we loved your tempo piece that you guys put together the other day. We dove through extensively and tried to identify why the tempo era might be over. But I'd love to hear from your mouth, the data points and just your opinion on, what that data says about the pace of play in college football.
Yeah, it really was a fun piece. Adam Rittenberg and I kind of teamed up on a piece that, I had noticed from just a pure data standpoint, like scoring's going down, and that could be kind of frustrating. I missed the old. I didn't need every game to be 49-42, and that one West Virginia Baylor game that was 70-63 or whatever, that was too much for me. I kind of turned into Chris Spielman in the booth at that one bowl game, the Baylor Washington bowl game, like just getting mad at the defenses. I still like points though. Points are fun. Points create plot twists, and they're going down. But then when I started playing with the data, I noticed that as much as scoring is falling, like offensive efficiency, like points per drive is increasing. And so, combined with what Rittenberg was finding out of talking to coaches, it has become this interesting thing between tempo going down and a surprising factor, fourth down conversions going up that are extending drives and creating a situation where we get fewer drives in a game. So a couple of, the clock rules from a couple of years ago sped up these trends, but the trends were already happening. And all that has basically meant that a decade ago we had about 13.1 drives per game per team, and now we have 11.7. That's a pretty big shift downward. Points per drive are going up, but the scoring's still down because it's like a pro game at this point where you just the drives take forever and you don't have as many drives.
It's really interesting too because this is reminiscent of kind of the tempo era in a respect where like it was in some ways a market inefficiency, and Big 12 teams in particular, Mike Leach, the Mike Gundy offense, had to sort of not play straight up. Like that was the idea, is we can't beat you straight up because if you want to, ground and pound and churn clock, like we're not happy to do that. Like,
Yeah.
Do you think like this is just the cyclical part of it, and like Oklahoma State once again, like they're going to be playing at a fast pace. Like I guess how do you sort of compartmentalize the pace part of this, and do you think it will again return because there's probably a lot of Big 12 teams that feel like we can't beat SEC or Big 10 teams straight up that way?
Right. I think there are two main factors for tempo going down. One of them is a more recent thing. Ryan Day talked about it in the article, just about how like we might have to play 17 games now, and the idea of 60 snaps per game versus 80 snaps per game, that's like a 300 snap difference by the end of the year. And while tempo can be designed to where defense is down, it's more injury risk and all these other things. And so the idea of wanting to slow down, of the best teams wanting to slow down just to pace themselves, kind of makes sense. And I think the other major factor, the reason the trend started a decade ago, really, 2016, I think was the last really fast year, and then tempo fell just about every season after that. I think the other major thing here is just defenses adjusted to tempo. The whole idea at first was when you run a play that and you find an advantage, you hurry to the line and do it again before the defense can adjust or substitute or anything like that. That was a big part of the reason for tempo. And I think defensive communication has gotten better. Those are the type of cyclical things where defenses will always adapt to an offensive advantage. And so while there are still Big 12 teams that are going to run tempo, Josh Heupel is still going to run tempo at Tennessee. Lane Kiffin is going to do it quite a bit, I'm sure, at LSU, because that's just what they do. Fewer coaches are trying that. Fewer coaches are finding those advantages. And so nationally, the tempo has not as many teams are trying to go fast.
Every year I always think about the teams, or my favorite team, that won or lost a bunch of close games. And if they won a bunch of close games, I'm nervous for the next season. If they lost a bunch of close ones, I feel really good about the upside. The other average thing that kind of has regression is turnover margin, and you do a phenomenal job of identifying those two things. So which teams from the Big 12 could that impact for this season?
I think, I did a couple pieces in March, I think, before the initial SP Plus release, just kind of laying out all the different ways that fortune can strike. And I think one of the teams that could benefit from just pure turnaround in luck, injuries, and everything else, I am really curious about Colorado. They kind of had, for all of their problems, for all their on-field problems last year, they were also very unfortunate in a lot of ways. And so, it's like my numbers don't like Colorado very much. Obviously, they weren't very good last year. But just looking specifically at the guys they brought in, the veteran talent that they brought in, I kind of like the transfer class. And if their luck changes as well, then maybe they aren't quite as doomed as a lot of the headlines currently say. So that's certainly one that where things could turn around a decent amount. If we look at it from the other direction, there were some Big 12 teams at the top of the turnovers luck list. Actually included Kansas State, which wasn't all that encouraging. I was talking myself into K-State a decent amount, and that might be something that brings them back a little bit. And BYU was pretty high on the list too. So curious about that. They did have some good fortune in close games and whatnot. So yeah, it is always a factor. I'm scrolling through the bottom of the turnovers list here, and besides Colorado, I'm not seeing another obvious turnaround candidate that was super unlucky last season. But there are always some.
All right, this is a parenting question, Bill. This is not a college football question. Scrolling through your Instagram, so you have a 14-year-old daughter that made you a Beavis coffee mug?
Yes.
Okay, so I have two boys. One is about to be 11. The other is about to be 8. They love The Simpsons. We watch all the oldies. Yeah. So when, South Park and Beavis and Butthead for me are a little bit too much. At what age did you were you okay showing your daughter Beavis and Butthead?
Yeah, age 9 to 14 is just one constant stream of, is she ready for this?
Yes.
What about this?
Yes.
And just kind of taking stabs in the dark, basically. But I think it was about a year ago that it was during the winter. She had a sick day or something, and my wife decided she was ready for Daria on Paramount Plus. So we watched the episode of that, and I said, actually, this is a character from another show, and she's enough of a music nerd too that Beavis and Butthead just all clicked for her immediately. So she does a decent cornholio for being a 14-year-old girl.
Well, and the cornholio mug is a thing of beauty. It's amazing.
I think I have it on my Zoom background up here too.
Sweet.
Also on your Zoom background, I want to make sure to promote Forward Progress, the definitive guide of the future of college football, a book you wrote. And if you're watching us on Big 12 Studios, you can see it behind Bill right now. So just let people know what it is.
Yeah, this was, I think it's almost a year old now. It was just my attempt at looking at where college football's come and where it's going, more or less. And I'm sure, I'm pretty sure I said in the book that there was a 51% chance of legislation getting passed at some point in the next couple of years. That's going to end up maybe being 49% at the end of the day. But, that's, I'm sure little pieces writing about current events is always really hard. So there are going to be little nuggets in there that are outdated. But it was just a history of realignment, history of television with college football, history of this and that. And, it helped me a lot to kind of gather, there's so many different forces of change at the moment, some good, some bad. This was my attempt at kind of corralling my thoughts, and I liked how it turned out.
Yeah, that's amazing. I need to check it out. Forward Progress, the definitive guide to the future of college football. I will read anything Bill Connelly writes, whether it's analytical or not. Bill, you're the best. Thanks for your time. Even as a Mizzou guy, you're the best. Appreciate you, buddy. Be well.
Absolutely. Take care.
Take care.
See you, Bill.
ESPN's Bill C. Bill Connelly joining us here, breaking down his thoughts on the season at large. Bill has such a great model with the SP Plus, but I think in addition to that, he's great to talk about the sport from a non-math lens, which is not always an easy thing to do for some of these incredible mathematicians that are involved in sports.
Right. Yeah. Those are two very different buckets, and I love what he has put together for the Big 12 because it tells me that Texas Tech is vastly underrated, that the other teams, basically 2 through about 7, are wide open and closer than we anticipated, which I don't think is a bad thing because of those teams, they're all either receiving votes or they're ranked in the preseason AP Top 25. So if it's somebody from that group that has a BYU-type season from what we saw last year, the Big 12 is in the conversation to have multiple teams in the college football playoff. And if Texas Tech runs through their schedule, even if they lose in the Big 12 championship game, like, they're going to be an at-large bid if they take care of business during the regular season. So just all of his numbers and his data get me even more hyped about the year to come.
All right, on the way next, it is our power rankings. It's a Wednesday. It's power ranking time. We're going to power rank the top 5 most important players going into the season of the Big 12. That's next. It's Big 12 Today, presented by Modelo with James Wesley. I'm Ari Tepkin, heard on TuneIn and watched on Big 12 Studios.